Well, we're here at the 14th Annual Port Townsend Film Festival, and I'm sitting here today with Dulanie, Ellis, and Raymond Singer, who are the producers, the co-producers of a really touching film I found by the name of Ground Operations. That is the story of returning combat vets from Iraq and Afghanistan who get back to the United States and find themselves terribly displaced and lost, really, and then find themselves. And now, Dulanie, I know that you've been in film for a long time, that you were associate producer on a film about Rosa Parks that was nominated for an Academy Award. And then in 2000 you started Walk the Talk Productions.
Right, Walk Your Talk Productions.
Walk Your Talk Productions. So, what talk are you walking?
Good question. I would say making a commitment to something and going the distance.
I see. And so,
and for me, that's as an advocate for food and farming in this country. This is the fifth film I've made about sustainable agriculture, and the best. There's no question. They all kind of led to this.
and was it previous films that actually led you
Yeah.
to the issue of what's happening to veterans when they're returning from war?
Yes, indeed. I took my films, previous ag films that I had, to a conference on ecological farming to sell them and to be at the conference. And I ran into this story. I ran into the fellow, Michael O'Gorman, who's doing the Farmer Veteran Coalition. And he was just getting started, and I could see that this just was the answer to a lot of different problems and a very exciting heart story. So I started tracking it. And then Raymond, we've known each other forever.
Our kids went to preschool together.
And he has a rich history as an actor, director, writer, and at that point, he had been already doing some filming, some shooting, and some editing, and so I quickly said, Raymond!
So on this subject?
No, on other subjects, but I said, Raymond!
I'm not walking my talk at all.
Well, and I understand that you were the editor of the film.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, I don't know which of you was responsible for the structure of the film, but I really enjoyed as I watched it through for the second time. I really sort of figured out what you were doing. And the film starts off with combat footage, and with these combat vets talking about their experiences of war and the very intense things that happened to them. And actually, I was happy to see not, like all necessarily saying it was horrible, it was terrible, I couldn't, abide it, but actually talking about the sense of fulfillment they got and the sense of mission and purpose. And then we track them as they arrive back in this country and find no real sort of transition program awaiting them, and fall into depression, and worse, start having like nightmares, and the things that they've done and the things that they've seen, come back to them, and they're unable to talk to their families, and then it moves on to them finding salvation, and whose idea was that structure?
Theirs.
Yeah.
What happened to them?
Yeah.
It's what they've discovered is that just the act of digging in the dirt, putting a seed in the ground, and seeing something grow is one of the men in the film says it's watching something grow and nurturing it and seeing something thrive works on a very deep spiritual level. And so rather than killing things, these guys are now loving things, and it makes a big difference. And then we've spoken to farmers who actually, kind of science farmers, and they actually say, well, there's scientific proof, I don't know what it would be, but that digging in the dirt and digging up all these things that are in the dirt and getting your hands in contact with them actually has a healing component to it.
It's actually a bacterium. The Swedes did a study and found that there's actually a bacterium in the soil that works in an antidepressant way.
It works sort of like Valium. I read about this.
So it turns out, hey, it really
Valium.
is healing, you know? Yeah. So the veterans in the story really, there are as many different ways as they found their way to agriculture as there were people in the story. And these are just the tip of the iceberg, you know, this is happening all over the country. So what's wonderful is it's great for them and it's great for us, because since we're losing half of our farmers to retirement.
That's right. What was the statistic you had in there?
Yeah.
Like 80% of the farmers now are over 65? Is that what you said?
Well, no,
or no, it's 80% more than there are under 35.
It's about 50% or so are over 57. So there are two different problems. You know, we have a great need for farmers in this country and ranchers and food producers, and then we have this whole group of veterans coming home who need really meaningful work. I mean, they really don't want to go get a job at Radio Shack. You know, they want something that they call the military the service. So they want to continue to serve their country. And so when you put these two together, it turns out that, you know, they each kind of solve one another's dilemma. And that's, to me, the magic of this. And it's why we want to get it out to more and more places. So we're showing it to like 3 military-based communities here in Washington this next week, so that we can start to introduce this to people who are still in active service, but might be looking for something and might not have even considered food production, you know, as a way to transition out of the military.
Right, and you were talking about them not wanting to work at Radio Shack, and one of the things that really stuck with me was, you know, these vets saying, well, even if I wanted to take an office job or something, I just don't have the capacity to be on focus like all the time. I just can't. Some of them.
I would say that's not the norm. That was the case for him because he had
Right.
to take a lot of pain medication because of the disease he got in Afghanistan. I would say quite the opposite. That the veterans we've met are phenomenally focused, and that is actually one of the things that, though it's not in the film, that they said to us in interviews several times was that was one of the things the military really taught them, was how to stay on point and totally focused. And that's why that one character was really noticing that he couldn't do that.
He couldn't, right.
But
And also-
most are.
Also the way that they can improvise. You know, what these guys are trained to do is to be on it, to accept a mission and move towards its goal, to move towards its finish.
Right.
And so along the way, you've got to improvise. If things go wrong, if things aren't the way that they were supposed to be or the way that you expected. And these guys can do that. And what do we have like that? Well, farming. Because you've got so many variables in farming.
Right.
That these guys are constantly shucking and jiving and trying to figure out how to do the next thing, and that's a challenge to get to the successful mission. And what a wonderful thing it is to think about the training that goes into a service person, Army, Navy, Marine, Air Force, goes into that and then uses that for the greater good of all of us here right now, solving this problem in particular of needing new farmers, needing to use the land that we've got to grow the food that we eat so that we don't have to import so much. It's a wonderful thing. It's kind of a use of a peacetime art.
Mm-hmm.
Well, another part that I'm actually personally acquainted with a couple of guys who suffer from PTSD, and you know, one of whom, you know, like wrecked his dad's pickup truck because there was a garbage bag at the side of the road, and
Right.
and
Sure.
there was you know, the passage in there that talked about the difficulties that many of them have coming back to urban living because
Right.
they're ever vigilant, they're ever, you know, like wary of everything, and there's so much going on around all the time. They just can't find peace, and so the peace and quiet of an agricultural setting being
Big.
Right. It's an interesting duality because on the one hand, being outside, being in nature and all of that has a very calming effect, but things that Ray was referring to, it's also such an incredibly challenging profession, farming and ranching, that one of the guys said, hey, you can really make this PTSD work for you. You know, it's like, if you're up at 3 in the morning and you can't sleep, fine, start preparing for the plan B, plan C, plan D, just like you would in the military for like, what happens if this doesn't work? You know, what do we do
So there's
next?
problem solving, but it's not the same kind of time pressure and time crunch. So the
Right.
improvisation can happen over, you know, it's piloting a sailboat rather than than a speedboat.
Well, now that one veterans farm you portrayed in there was really interesting. I was wondering where
Which one are
that
you
was.
talking about?
Well,
The
there's,
Veterans
there's,
Farm?
I guess
Veterans
the
Farm.
Veterans
Yeah,
Farm,
that's in
yes, the
Florida.
Veterans Farm. It's in Florida. It seemed really great because here were these guys who, once again, were also really working as a team, which is something that they're also trained
That's
to
a
do.
key element.
And I was wondering, I mean, is that unique, or are there veterans farms now springing up all across
They
the
are,
land?
they are. And you have one right here in Washington, up in Bellingham. Growing Veterans is a new farm this year, and we're gonna be doing some benefit screenings with them. So they're training vets in organic ag up in Bellingham. And there's a network starting here in Washington to kind of connect to one another, which is just great. Yeah.
Well, so another thing you talked about was the lack of transition programs. Is the government kind of waking up and paying attention to this movement and starting to fund it at all?
Sort of the way Rip Van Winkle wakes up, really slowly.
Yeah, yeah. We're not seeing that yet. We hope to see that. But, you know, we are taking the film to Washington DC for Veterans Day. So we're showing it at the USDA, and we've got a congressional screening being put together for staff and congressional members. So we hope, you know, little by little, to get that word out there on a policymaker level.
No, I know you're still busy going around and showing this
Right.
film and utilizing it for the
Right.
purposes for which you made it, but are you starting to think about the next walk you're going to take?
We have a film about farm worker housing that they're asking, that I did one about 10 years ago, and they're asking, because it was so successful with their program, they're asking for another one next year to kind of update. So, yeah, but we'll work this film for some time.
Great. Well, now, so if people want to get hold of you, is there some website they can refer
Oh, yeah,
to? Or?
groundoperations.net.
Say that again, groundoperations.net.
Groundoperations.net.
That would be
And
def-
actually, it's great for veterans as well, because we've got a lot of resources on there for where different farms are and training programs and that sort of thing.
Great.
And we're taking donations, of course, to help the campaign.
Of course. Well, I want to thank you both very much for
Thank you.
taking part in the 14th Annual Port Townsend Film Festival and being with us here today.
Thanks for having us. It's just
Been
great.
a
We love
pleasure.
Port Townsend.
Yeah.